In the name of God who creates, redeems, and sanctifies. Amen. I invite you to be seated for a sermon for all ages. So if we have some kids in here who would like to come up and join me, I know we have some kids in the Sunday school room who will be making their way here momentarily, I hope. Otherwise, I'll be giving this children's sermon to you. So come on and join me. If you'd like to. Come on. Sit up here. All right. Some of you can sit on this side of me too if you want. Okay. So, today I'm going to tell you about a story from the Gospels. So the people in here heard this story a minute ago, but I'm going to tell it for you again, and because I think we could all use a reminder of the story. Okay, so the story starts with Jesus walking. Now, have you noticed that in the Bible, Jesus walks a lot, right? Why do you think that is? Anyone have a thought? Yes?
Because cars were invented back then?
Cars were not invented back then, right, yeah. So some people were able to journey on horses or camels even, but that cost a lot of money. And so Jesus was actually like a regular person. He wasn't someone who had a lot of money. And he was a teacher. But he didn't have a job as a teacher. He just went around and taught people. And so whenever Jesus was walking, he always had a lot of people around him. And they were his students. He was a teacher, and they were his students. And they were students of all ages, mostly adults, but people certainly brought kids to hear him as well. In fact, Jesus one time, the disciples, his followers said, "Oh, hey, these kids are bothering you, aren't they?" And Jesus was like, "No, bring the kids here." So there's a special word for Jesus' followers, which I'd actually just said a minute ago. Disciples, right? Have you all heard that word before? Disciples. Now, how many disciples do you think Jesus had? Anyone have a... Yep. 70? 60? Yeah. 80? 12. Okay. 90. All of these are good answers. 12 is a number we often talk about with the disciples, the 12 disciples, right? But there were actually a lot more than that. Those 12 were his closest disciples. And so they're called the 12 disciples, but he had a lot of disciples. So do you remember what disciple means? Follower or student. That's right. It's a fancy word, disciple. It comes from Latin, discipulus. But originally it was Greek because the New Testament, which is our half of the Bible that we learn about Jesus from, it was written in Greek. And so I can't remember at the moment what that Greek word was, so we'll just lay that aside. I was looking it up earlier, but we're just going to lay that aside and just remember disciple, all right? Disciple means student. Okay, so Jesus had lots of followers. He had his 12 closest followers, the 12 disciples. And among these 12 disciples, he became really good friends with these people. He spent a lot of time with them. He hung out with them. They had fun together. They had meals together. They even joked around. And let's put a pin in that joke. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. All right? So of the 12 disciples, did you know 4 of them were actually 2 pairs of brothers? Anyone know who some of those brothers might be? Yep. They were fishermen. That's right. Very good. Yes. So Jesus had a number of fishermen, or people who fished, among his disciples. And so 2 of them were called Simon and Andrew. We also know Simon by the name Peter. And then the other set of brothers, their names are James and John. James and John. And Jesus, who joked around with his disciples a lot, he had a nickname for them. They were called the Sons of Thunder. Let's say that in a really dramatic way. The Sons of Thunder, yeah? It sounds like a wrestling name, right? The Sons of Thunder. So what do you think that might mean about the kind of people they were, their personalities, if Jesus called them the Sons of Thunder? Anyone have an idea? What's thunder like? It's a sound after lightning. Yeah, okay. Yeah, any other thoughts? Sound before lightning, yeah. Yes? Yeah. Powerful, yeah, powerful. It's like the sound with lightning, yeah, powerful. Might it be scary sometimes? Yeah, like it's loud. I think that maybe Jesus was calling them, James and John, loud mouths. Have you ever heard that before? Yeah. Yeah. It's not the nicest thing to say, but it's not the meanest thing either. But it's to say that someone kind of talks a lot and they talk loud and it's a lot of noise, but maybe there's not a lot of substance behind it. Yapping? Okay, yeah. So he's saying they're yappers, they're loudmouths, the sons of thunder, all right? So one time, James and John said, Jesus, we want to be your most important disciples. Well, what do you think that made the other disciples feel like? Not so good? Yeah? Maybe a little angry at them too? Yeah? A little jealous. Oh, yes. Absolutely. So that's kind of who James and John are. So let's remember that. James and John, sons of thunder. Okay? So on this day that Jesus was walking, because he walked a lot, he was traveling from where he's from in Galilee down to the region of Judea, which is where Jerusalem was. Now, Jerusalem was the ancient capital of the nation of Israel. And at one time, Israel was one united kingdom. But long before the time of Jesus, it divided into the north and the south. And in the north, the capital became Samaria, and in the south, it was Jerusalem. And the people in the north eventually became called Samaritans because over time, centuries, the same practices that they had together as one people began to be a little bit different. They had all the same ancestors, they had the same religious beliefs and practices, but as people traveled and migrated there from other lands, things changed a little bit for them. And because they were far away from Jerusalem, they started their own customs there. And so Jerusalem had the big temple, Solomon's temple, right? And that's where the Jewish people thought was the holiest place in all the world. But the Samaritans said, you know what? Actually, we think the holiest place is up here where we are, on Mount Gerizim. And so that's where their temple was. And so there was a lot of disagreement then among the Samaritans and the Jewish people of Judea. And they began to fight a lot. And by the time of Jesus, they were not the best of friends. In fact, there was a lot of meanness between the two groups of Samaritans and the Jewish people. And they didn't like one another very much. But for Jesus to go from Galilee down to Judea, he had to travel through Samaria, through the region of Samaria. And he was traveling and was going to come through this small village, and he said, hey, go ahead and tell the people of this village that we're coming through, we're on our way to Jerusalem. Well, when they found out that they were on their way to Jerusalem, the people in the village were upset because they knew that Jesus and his friends, who were Jewish, thought that Jerusalem was where the holiest place in the world was. And the Samaritans say, no, the holiest place is on Mount Gerizim. And so they were not welcoming of Jesus and his disciples, and they said, no, don't come here. And so Jesus then, his two disciples, James and John, the sons of thunder. How do you think the sons of thunder felt about being told they were not welcome in a village? Mad. Yes, they were mad. Yeah, your friend would like that. Any other thoughts? They were mad, all right? They were mad. They're mad for themselves and on behalf of Jesus. And so, do you know what they said? They said, Jesus, do you want us to call upon the sky and call down fire from the sky to destroy this village because they are being so mean to us? Whoa. That's kind of scary, right? Do you think that they actually had the power to do that, to bring down fire from the sky? You think so? A lot of people don't think so. Yeah? If it was what? If there was terrible need for that, maybe. Yeah? Maybe. We don't really know if they actually have the power to do that, but because Jesus calls them kind of these loud mouths that don't necessarily have a lot of substance behind them, I'm thinking maybe they don't have that power. But anyway, that was a really strong thing to say. Let's destroy this village. Do you think that was the right thing to say? Heck no. Any other thoughts? Well, anyway, what do you think Jesus thought about that? Jesus wasn't having it. That's right. And Jesus said, he said, no way. I'm not going to let you destroy this village just because they're not welcoming us. And so Jesus said, that is not who I am. And, I think it made him a little sad probably too, because even after all this time they've spent together, James and John still don't understand who he really is and what he's about. He said, I'm not about war and violence and raining down fire from the sky on people who disagree with me. And so he said, you know what? Why don't we just go and leave this village and go to the next one where they might welcome us? And so, friends, that is what Jesus teaches us. That whenever people are mean to us, we don't need to give back to them that same meanness. Instead, we can just say, you know what? I'm going on my way. I'm going to go to the next village. I'm going to go to the next people, and I'm going to leave your violence and negativity behind, and I'm going to go and find new friends in other places. So that's what Jesus wants for us. He wants us to seek peace and to avoid war and violence and hate. And sometimes that's hard work, working for peace. But that is what we as a church are called to do, is to love one another and to love the whole world. And where there are barriers between people, we try to take down those barriers. We try to make one people. Just like we say at the table when we have communion together, we say, this is God's table, all are welcome. That's what Jesus asks us to do, to go out into the world and share his love with everyone, to make everyone feel welcome. And whenever they're not nice and welcoming to us, well, we don't have to be mean back. We just say, okay, and walk on and go to the next village. Do you have any questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me up here. And I hope that you enjoyed the story. And there's a lot more of these stories where that came from. All right? So I'll see you next month on the last Sunday for another sermon for all ages. Okay? You can go back to your seats.